Welcome back to the Standard Podcast, and I'm Mark Blunden. Please do make sure to give us a follow and a rating. Coming up, can campaigning to save heritage buildings help boost the local economy? But first, Labour Party officials are investigating alleged racist and sexist comments in leaked WhatsApp group chat messages that culminated in the sacking of Health Minister Andrew Gwynn. The large group, said to have included MPs, councillors and party officials, swapped posts over 3 years. It is the latest messaging-based scandal to hit the authorities, particularly after COVID, where the governments of Boris Johnson and Nicola Sturgeon were criticised over a lack of transparency surrounding vanishing text messages. It meant expunged chats, fragments of conversations and even informal decision-making were not part of critical paper trails. Now the Standard Podcast is joined by Maurice Frankel, Director of the Campaign for Freedom of Information. Apparently the fact you have MPs, councillors and potentially party officials all conversing in a large WhatsApp group. What is your view and what do you think the risks are?
I don't have any problem with members of a political party communicating with each other privately, but I mean, it is reckless, really, for them to be making offensive comments in these type of groups, particularly as if they're doing it in a recorded form. And it's bad of them to be making comments of this kind at all. You know, they should be watching what they're saying. If they're inclined to do it, they should stop themselves. It obviously implies a lack of professionalism and a lack of consideration for colleagues and for the people they're meant to be helping.
Looking back to the problems we had, particularly during the COVID era, the, in quotes, vanishing WhatsApp messages, which seem to highlight these issues with the business of government being undertaken in part by instant messaging. What's your view on the problems with this, the admin problems, the democratic problems, and how do you think freedom of information legislation needs to evolve to keep up?
Well, any recorded information, regardless of the form in which it is held, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act if it's held by or on behalf of a public authority. So technically, messages sent by WhatsApp are covered by the Freedom of Information Act. The problem is that WhatsApp can be used to auto-delete messages after a number of hours after they've been received. And so they'd simply, by the time an FOI request comes in, it's quite likely that they aren't held anymore. In that way, they evade freedom of information. So it's not that WhatsApp itself is the problem, it is the automatic deletion of messages which are sent on behalf of a public authority. So it's because they're sent on behalf of a public authority that freedom of information would apply at all. Now, the Labour WhatsApp group, that was not sent on behalf of a public authority. MPs themselves are not public authorities. So the public authority are the Houses of Parliament for parliamentary affair matters. So that would not be subject to the Freedom of Information Act, regardless of how the information was held, if it was simply people making comments, personal comments about the people they're dealing with, unless what they're discussing is the carrying out of official business. And now the problem is that it's very easy to avoid freedom of information by using this auto-delete function on a messaging system. It's not just that, because the same problem arises with ordinary emails, because government departments have got policies, most of them, of deleting emails after a certain period of time, quite often after 3 months. That means that by the time a FOI request comes in, the email may no longer exist. And so we're dealing with exactly the same problem as with WhatsApp messages, which is they're no longer there when somebody asks for them. The solution in terms of public authorities and government is meant to be either don't use these systems, or if you do use them, either WhatsApp or similar messaging system or email, transfer them onto the official record so that they are retained. The difficulty is that puts the onus on the individual official or minister to transfer it, and the default position, if they don't do it, is the material is going to be deleted automatically after a short or slightly longer period of time, and the record won't be there when it's needed for accountability purposes.
Would you be able to explain to our listeners how the Freedom of Information Act has changed since 2000? And in your view, with any of these changes or updates, is government more or less transparent?
Well, although the Act was passed in 2000, its drafting is quite good in terms of dealing with electronic information. So, you can make your request by email. Emails held by a government department or public authority are subject to the Act, and WhatsApp messages and similar messages are also subject to the Act. So it really doesn't matter in what form the information is held, so long as it is still held at the time of the request. All that somebody needs to do to ask for information under the Act is to put in a written request or an emailed request to the department or public authority that you think holds the information, and they are then required to either disclose the information, normally within 20 working days, but there are extensions allowed, or explain why they're entitled to withhold it under one of the Act's exemptions. And if you're unhappy with the outcome, either you don't believe that they don't hold the information or you don't believe that it is exempt, then you must first ask the authority to reconsider its refusal. And after that, you're free to go to the Information Commissioner, who is the regulator of the Freedom of Information Act, and ask them to investigate whether the authority has properly complied with the Act. Actually, if an authority attempts to deliberately destroy an email or a record after it's been requested in order to prevent disclosure under Freedom of Information, the authority and the individual official or minister would commit a criminal offence. So it's quite a serious matter to try and do that, but that provision is very difficult to enforce because action has to be taken within 6 months of the deletion occurring. And the delays in processing Freedom of Information requests and getting replies to requests are quite substantial sometimes. And it's often sometimes more than 6 months before you get a final refusal. And by the time the Information Commissioner is able to begin to investigate, it is very likely to be past the 6-month deadline. Those are the problems. So the Act does anticipate these type of problems, but its provisions are not really tough enough to properly deal with them.
Let's go to a quick break. Coming up in part 2, can heritage buildings campaigning help boost a local economy? We speak with the World Monuments Fund's Chief Executive, John Darlington. Welcome back. The World Monuments Fund has unveiled its 2025 Heritage at-Risk watch list, which includes global sites of international importance and even the moon. But can a listing backed up by the work of campaigners help boost the local economy around it? The Standard's Rachel Abbott asked John Darlington, Director of Projects at World Monuments Fund in Britain.
What is the World Monuments Fund watch list?
The World Monuments Watch has been going on since 1996, and it happens every 2 years. And the starting point is that we put a call out to the world to say, have you got something, a monument, a site, a building, a collection of buildings on your doorstep, which you love passionately, but there's something which needs solving. There must be some kind of threat or issue that it faces. So we put that call out, and then we get back from local communities. And that's the wonderful thing about the watch. It's always based bottom up. It's not international organisation parachuting in. It is a local community who happen to have X and Y on their doorstep, and they nominate the watch. And then we go through a process where we look at a number of things. We look at how significant a place might be, a site, a monument. We look at, is there a threat? Is there something that site is facing, be it damage, be it too many tourists, too little tourists? Is it economic or urban development on the doorstep? So we look at the threat. Then we take a very close look at the partners, the people who are nominating the watch site, and we rely so much on them. We have to make sure we've got nominators who are kind of excellent, great spokespeople, and invariably they are, because they've gone this far. From those kind of bits of information, we go through a process which takes about a year, actually, from nomination. where we literally reduced down a long list. So in this case, for the 2025 watch, we had over 200 plus nominations from around the world.
Anything on the list in London?
Whilst there's not a London site on the current watch, there have been a whole series of absolutely outstanding sites in the capital over the past 3 decades or so. The ones which spring to mind would be, well, they range from the magnificent Nicholas Hawksmoor Church, which is St George's, Bloomsbury. So 18th century church created by Nicholas Hawksmoor. It was placed on the 2002 watch. And subsequent to that, because it was in a really bad state, the walls were covered in soot, the stonework was looking tired, the interior had been completely messed around, mainly by the Victorians, but people after that as well. So the 2002 watch then sparked an amazing conservation program. We worked on Battersea Power Station, which is on the watch in 2004 and 2014. And obviously that's now a very successful shopping experience, I should say. But that was significantly under threat.
What is there in Northern Ireland this year?
Our UK site for the 2025 watch is actually Belfast's Assembly Rooms, created in 1769. Back then, this hub for kind of new thinking of, I guess it's the age of enlightenment. So it's people kind of interested in science and technology and nature and antiquities, archaeology. So it becomes the focus for the Enlightenment, and there's all kinds of amazing discoveries and amazing events which happen there. So there's a moment in Belfast history where there was a proposition to set up a slave trading company. That was firmly rejected in the Assembly Rooms. And there's another nice moment in 1792, I think it is, when the blind harpists of Ireland are essentially assembled. And it may sound a little thing, but actually that's a tradition and a recording which echoes across the whole of Ireland. So amazing building. Unfortunately, it gets converted into a bank in 1845, and then about for the last 25 years has been in private ownership and is simply falling apart. It's decaying. It's not accessible to the public. And so the Assembly Rooms Alliance nominated it to the 2025 watch, and it was successful. And so we're going to work with them to put it back into public ownership.
Do you think supporting local monuments can help local communities economically?
We're starting off from a very positive place. We've got people nominating these sites. And a huge number of these sites can be economic drivers for the good. It can be tourism. There definitely can be an economic and social driver. And that's the bit we're interested in. It's the bit which says we can benefit. You want to balance benefiting the monument, the site, whatever it might be, with at the same time making sure that the local community, who are the people who invested in looking after it, also benefit. So that's part of it. And there are countless examples of what we'd call, I guess, heritage-led regeneration, is where you concentrate on a particular monument, and through restoring that monument, you get a boost to the whole area. On the 2025 watch, we've got a cinema which is 50 years old in Angola, and to repurpose that will have an economic benefit to the surrounding neighbourhood. So there's a whole range of wonderful sites.
And that's the Standard. For the latest news, head over to standard.co.uk. This podcast is back tomorrow at 4 p.m.